Hello, I'm Craig Constantine. Welcome to Pod Talk, short conversations with podcast creators that are not just about podcasting, because I like to take the scenic route. My guest today is Alison Coates. Welcome, Alison. How are you?
Hi, Craig. I'm really good, thank you.
Yay, tech problems. This is a show about podcasting, so we try not to hide the fact that sometimes things go horribly wrong. We'll do this again, but now we're on Zoom. So we had a great laugh because I went to all the trouble of setting up a question, asked the question, and then Allison is just staring at me because she couldn't hear me or see me. What I had said that you probably didn't hear a word of was, can you paint me a picture of uh, your space? And I mean, that can be your home or outside, but what I'm curious about is how is like what's going on around you? Is it energizing you or is it feeling challenging? And we're getting into like the seasonal shoulder shift here as we head into fall. So like, what's that picture look like for you?
It's changed in the time we've been talking.
That's the joke about
Because
Scotland. Don't like the weather? Wait 5 minutes.
yep, it's quite true. I'm on the west coast of Scotland in a little village called Tynaburgh, and I have an amazing view out of my window of the Kyles of Bute, which is a stretch of water between the mainland and the Isle of Bute. And sometimes I can see Bute, other times it disappears in the mist. And today it's done all of those. And at the moment, there's fluffy white clouds and blue sky. But not long ago, it was pouring with rain. So we get all the weather in a day and in half an hour. Um, and I'm just noticing today that the autumn leaves are just beginning to turn. There's a bit of yellow
Mm.
appearing in the trees, and the temperatures definitely dropped from a couple of weeks ago when we had a little burst of an Indian summer for a week, which was quite a treat. But now it's back down to yeah, autumn's coming, or fall
Sweaters.
for you people.
Fall. Yeah, there's something like it's autumn and then it's fall and then fall and then autumn. Like there's apparently fall and autumn are different. I'm like, whatever. I don't need to be digging into words. Um, so I'm guessing since you're, um, I want to say immersed or embedded, since there's so little between you and that those spaces that you're describing, it's not like, oh, I have to go down 7 flights of stairs and then I have to ride the subway and then I'm at the sea. Since you're so right up against um, those experiences, do you find do you find that you engage with those spaces to change your mood? Like, oh, I'm in mood A, and I know if I go for a walk, then I'll be in a better mood. Or do you find that you're just sort of have your tendrils into all that, and it's just become part of who you are? Like, I'm wondering if you use that intentionally, or if it's just an experience that you.
Hmm, good question. It feels very much part of who I am and how my life is because I have these huge windows at the front of my house which look out at this amazing view. So it's there all the time, except
Mm,
when the mist appears. And I can choose to go for walks in different places. There's a most gorgeous beach, which is a short drive and a walk away that it feels so precious to be able to go there and just wander with my dog and often even in the height of summer there's nobody else there and it's this huge sandy bay and with a view of the Isle of Arran, um, and that's a favorite place to go and really sort of be alone with my thoughts and contemplate nature. And I did have a habit of listening to podcasts and things while I was walking. And then one day I didn't. And it was such a different experience. It was
mm.
like I could hear the wind in the trees and it was yeah, felt so much more engaged with nature because I didn't have somebody else's voice in my head.
the yes, I'm with you on. So I'm a big fan of perambulating. Again, I go out. I just went for a perambulation this morning. Often I go running. Oh, did I just say that while being recorded? Yikes. Um, but this morning I was like, no, I need to go for a walk. So I was out for about an hour, and I was walking through the woods on trails. There's not a lot of large views. It's, you're always like in stuff.
Mm.
Um, but I found a few years ago that I couldn't, not that I couldn't, but when I was listening to podcasts, I had two problems. One, podcasts, the ones that I'm listening to, give me ideas. And if I'm walking, then I'm like a weirdo, like, how do I write this down or capture it? And I found that I came back much more energized and recharged if I just went and left the walk and the visual and the audio, let that all just be space for my thinking to happen.
Mm.
So I'm totally picking up what you're laying down about. I used to listen to podcasts while walking, and it's a completely different experience without it. What's your dog's name?
Murdoch.
Say it again.
Murdoch.
Murdoch.
Yeah.
Murdok.
D-O-C-K.
Dock.
Yeah.
I was just curious. You have headphones on, so I know sometimes if I'm feeling mischievous, I will call people's dogs' names. Murdoch, Murdoch, but I know you have headphones on, so the dog can't hear me.
And he's very, very old and very deaf. So he
Oh,
probably wouldn't hear you
we'd get along
anyway.
just fine. I too am pretty friggin' deaf. Um, yeah. Do you? So this is. I know what's going on. Anybody listening, they're not going, why aren't we talking about podcasting? Nobody cares about that. But I actually am thinking about podcasting here because, as I say at the beginning, I talk to indie podcasters, right? Like podcast creators. And we all know that that's a very solo endeavor. Even if you have other crazy people you can talk to about it, it really winds up being the only person who's thinking about this at night, falling asleep is oneself. And I'm wondering, you mentioned that you listened and probably still do listen to a lot of podcasts, but how has, let's say it this way, how has, I happen to know that you haven't been where you are currently for like ages and ages, but how has moving there changed the way you think about podcast creation? Like, did you have a vision maybe before of what you were going to do? And then through change of embedded experience, now that's like, it doesn't feel like the thing I want to do now. I'm fishing for transitions around what you want to create and transitions around spaces.
Yeah. I've been here about 18 months now, and it feels like it's been a very quiet time, and that I've been quietly absorbing the the community around me, and I'm fascinated by the community, and seeing the mix of people who
And how
live
long has
here.
that community been there? Because I'm from the States, so 10 years is long. How long has that community been there?
It's um see, now I'm being tested on the history of.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Well,
Hundreds
there
of
used to
years,
be
right?
a few, maybe a couple of 100 years.
Mm,
There's they're probably older than that, but there's the main village. There's a lot of houses that were built by the rich merchants from Glasgow
mm,
who would come on the steamers to their big houses, and there was also a gunpowder mill,
mm.
where the workers worked and had explosions occasionally.
Sorry, I
Um,
derailed your train of thought. So you were saying you're beginning to inhale and settle into the pace of the village.
yeah, so it's just fascinating, having not knowing anybody here or anything about the village, and then discovering the different sort of layers of um, society, and who lives here and what their stories are. And there's a lot of second homes. So when I first arrived in the winter, I was really puzzled as to why.
Where's everybody?
Seems like there's nobody here. And I was right, there was nobody here. But over the last few years, apparently more people have become permanent residents because they've discovered that they can work remotely,
Mm,
and people have made different decisions about where they want
what
to
matters?
spend their
Yeah.
time and what matters. Yeah. Um, and there's various community projects that are going on, including a community forest, and which is quite an incredible project. But there's a lot of human stories in there that I would really like to share in some way. But I was thinking I'm building up the courage to ask people, but I'm also building connections. And it feels like those connections are now beginning to come together. That I I was reading a newsletter from the forest that was, it must have been published 2 or 3 years ago. And when I first read it, it was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I read it recently, and every article and person mentioned in there,
Mm.
I now know I can put a face to those people, and I know more of their story and who they are. Um, so yeah, there's something brewing about the people in this community, and yeah, there's interesting stories about um, what it takes to be um, a local. That there's people who have family connections that go back generations. That people would have, like, their grandparents had a house here and they came here every holiday as a child, and but they're not local. And and then there's people who were born here who were local and seem to be very unhappy with anybody who wasn't born here. And
Mm.
so there's and social media, particularly Facebook. There's a Facebook group, and
Do the
it
local?
can
Well, wait.
be quite. It's where the news. It's
I
where
was
you
gonna
get the
say
local
that's not the
news.
locals. They're not on Facebook. What?
But you get these spats go, like somebody will
Yeah.
make a comment, and then there'll be an angry comment about these incomers who
Mm.
want to change everything. So, but what I've really noticed is that the village and the community need everybody. We need the second homeowners, and we need the locals, and yeah, everybody in between. And the community is actually thriving now. That there's a primary school which used to have about, I think it had about 40 pupils, and they're now at over 70. So
Mm. Yeah, you're getting
there's a
some spread in the
change.
generations and the
Yeah,
ages. That's always a good sign when people are bringing their families and starting families there.
yeah.
Mm. I pause. I say this a lot. It's not because I'm like, huh, all right, I'm done. It's like, oh no, I got 90 ideas I want to ask about. Um, you that all really sounds pregnant. Like there is a podcast or I happen to know you mentioned doing film. Like there's a creative thing there that's not poked its green shoots up yet. What's that, like, sow this year, reap 2 years out, or something like that. Um, and I feel like there is a creative pre-process that you're deeply into there, and you also sound very aware of that. So I'm wondering, like, how aware are you of, because you very clearly said, I read this thing, then I read it again, and now I'm realizing that I'm developing these relationships with these people, and now these stories have meaning. And I'm wondering, are you actively like, another year from now, here's the idea of the thing I'm going to create, or are you just hands off? I don't know. It's been going great for 18 months. Let's just not touch, don't touch the soup.
No, something is bubbling up, that because I've wondered, it's like, well, how did I end up here, and why did I end up here? And there's there's some purpose to it, and it feels that it is around, yeah, it's around the community, and I'm still sort of formulating the idea about, is it about the community seeing themselves and being able to value what they have within the community, rather than, because I get really upset when I see this tension between the the locals and the incomers, and it mainly isn't that like that. People are so welcoming of everybody. Um, so yeah, so there's one side of it is like helping the community, because there has been a lot of tension over community forest and things like that. Um, but then the other side is, well, yeah, wouldn't it be interesting for people outside of this community to have a little insight into what it's like to live in a Scottish village that's 45 minutes drive from a supermarket?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so I'm getting braver, and I'm sort of I've been talking more openly with people locally about what I have done in the past with making films, and yeah, sort of sowing seeds and
Looking for
waiting for
cohorts. Yes.
waiting for germination.
Who's on my team? Who's on Team Allison? Um, I'm a very visual person, so I just had this question. Like, so I assume you have a high street. We'd call them a main street here in the States. So if you like went from your house, I don't need to know exactly where you live, but like if you went from your house and you like walked across the village on High Street on a random weekday morning, how many people would you pass, and what's the vibe when you pass them? Like, is it like in the States, a lot of times it's eyes down, don't make eye contact because I don't want to get attacked, you know? Like, is it, I know it's not big city, but like, what's that vibe when you walk down the high street?
Yeah, the high street is, I think it is called High Street, but it
What little I know about
it's
the UK is, of course, you have a high street, and it's called High Street.
but it's not like a high street you might know. It, I think there's, I don't know, maybe seven shops in the
Mm,
high street. Um, and yeah, I can go for a walk. So I walk my dog every day, and I can see nobody. Or other days I will see people, but it and more it is it yes, it used to be that I could go for a walk and I wouldn't see anybody, or I'd see someone and just sort of nod hello. So I could be listening to a podcast or
mm.
talking on the phone. But now, whenever I go out, I see people I know, and it's stopping for a chat and how are you? What's going on? Um, and then and even visitors to the village. So during the summer, there's quite a lot of visitors, although apparently this summer was quieter than it has been. Um, and and even then, it's always eye contact and saying hello. That's if somebody, yeah, because I was in England recently, and I was quite shocked when somebody walked past me and just didn't even look up. And it was like, yeah, so I've just got used to, yeah, if you walk past a person, you acknowledge that
Right.
I'm a person, you're a person. Yeah, hello, how you doing?
Mm.
And yeah,
So I
it's
asked,
easy to forget.
yeah. So I asked for that image, you know, because I know you well enough that you're really good at painting those kinds of pictures. I asked for that image because as as an independent podcaster, I am always walking around. It's an audio podcast, so I have like my hands over my head, like I'm deep in thought, and I'm like staring 3 feet in front of me. I don't often have my hands on my head, but like figuratively, I'm in like this. I'm literally closing myself off with my hands from the world, and literally in my thinking, it's all like, "Well, how am I going to do this? And what is this going to be? And I have to do that, and then I have to do this thing." And that's aside from being unhealthy, that is a really tough place or an almost impossible place to plant fertile seeds. So we were talking about this idea that you this it might be an idea. We don't know what it is. There's this thing bubbling up. And I was trying to get you to really unpack for us, because I think that high street and all the rest of it that you've been describing is actually energizing you. So you're transitioning mentally about how you think about creating because of where you've embedded yourself. And from what I know of the backstory, you didn't just throw a dart at the map; that there was some consideration. Like, I think I'm going to go here. So that worked out spectacularly well, I think. Also sounds like, ooh, that's lucky to be able to to not be so rooted in one place. You're like, oh, like, it'd be pretty easy for me to move, but a lot of people I know, if they were going to move, it's like, this is a major uprooting to try and move location. So I think super mad props for being able to do that, and then being able to actually take that gift you gave yourself and do something with it. There's no question there.
Thank you. It's funny, it's just hearing you just sort of reflect that back to me. It just feels normal to do what I've done, because it's just what I've done. But yeah, if I look back at, I suppose, previous stages of my life, I would have been, and I know I was completely stuck in, no, this is where I am and this is what I have to do. But yeah, by making choices over the years that weren't what was expected of me and weren't what other people would have done, then it's got easier to make other choices, to do things differently and move. Yeah, practice.
There's a thing about profundity. Sorry, it's kind of like your language is you that smoke me, but I don't mean like drop this big word to people listening. But if somebody says something profound, which is of profundity has appeared, there's nothing you can say in answer to that. So what you just said was awesome. Rewind, listen to that again. I think that talking about those, so like in my opinion, me managing to get other people to talk about that stuff is super, like, to me, that's how my podcast, my work changed the world, because there have to be people who are nodding along like, yep, I understand exactly what Alison is talking about. I'm in the middle of that, or I did that. Cause I'm thinking of people who've been on the show who are like, their story is like, they did that kind of thing. And then they told great, afterwards, this was awesome. But I think normalizing that is super important. And we were talking about normalizing. I don't want to like let's make a whole nother topic everyone want to talk about. But I really think normalizing profound, right, that's grammar, sentences, words into pudding. I think we do a lot of good by taking the time to stop and unpack things that are actually profound. Because if they're just normal for us, we're like missing this opportunity to give this gift to other people. Like, this is really profound. I'm aware that it's profound, and I really want to share how awesome I think it is. So I really enjoy, as he rambles and waves his hands, I really enjoy getting people to unpack that, because I'm just like, that's really cool. Tell more people about that, which is what we're doing.
Yeah.
I'm just tormenting you by not asking you questions, but
which would just, yeah, what you've been saying has reminded me of conversations that I've had with people in the village, around, yeah, my youngest coming out as non-binary at the end of last year, and they're 26 now, and their pronouns are they them, and I decided to talk about it, and so I would talk to people, and it was a very interesting process to hear responses and be quite surprised at how transphobic some people were, and also how me talking about it opened up conversations with people about either themselves or their own children about any sort of difference, not necessarily about non-binary or trans, but whether it was
The incomers versus the people who live here.
yeah,
Like, what car
yeah,
is this person driving? I'm like, the little drone behind that conversation, and I can just see, that figurative person responding, and then being like, wow, I mean, Alison doesn't seem to be wigged out by this, and like just being your normal or reasonable self, like just one, not specifically you necessarily, but it's one, just being a normal, regular person and saying like, this is not something I usually encountered. I encountered it, and here's what I think about it. And people that just begin that you're normalizing reacting reasonably, which just that is a useful thing to do in the world.
yeah, because it was the whole coming out process and how I somehow I volunteered to share the news with grandparents and other family members, because that's what they wanted, and I sort of got my knickers in a twist about it. It was suddenly this sort of tiny little insight into how it must be for
For
that person
people experiencing that
to coming
first person,
out,
yeah.
and yeah, and and then I spoke to my son, and he was just like, well, it's just information.
Because it's normalized, yes.
And for him, yeah, it's far more normalized. Like, he's in his 20s, and it's not that big deal. But then me thinking about speaking to my dad, who's nearly 90, and having like all of this stuff going on in my head, and then it's like, okay, no, Matt says it's just information. So I remember calling my mum and saying, I've I've got some information to share with you. So she said, oh, do I need a pen and paper?
Perhaps. This may be a grammar lesson too, Mom.
I said, no, I don't. I think you'll remember this.
You might want to sit down, but yes.
And yeah, it was just amazing to be, and sort of looking back at it, realizing that me coming into the conversation with, I'm just sharing some information. And so each person that I shared it with just accepted that information. And it's like, yeah, this is still the same person that you've always known and loved. It's just they've changed their name and their pronouns are different. And it was that normalizing of it, rather, because if I'd gone, oh my God, this thing has happened.
Mom, you're not going to believe what happened, right? Yeah. Yeah. As if it's a new thing that just happened, right?
Yeah. So it's felt so, I think it's so amazing to be able to speak to people, and then for people to recognize something in that of themselves, about whether it's the courage to be like the courage to be yourself. And that's the thing that I admire most about my youngest, is that despite all the transphobia out there, and there's a lot, they are so much happier being who they are. And it yeah, it makes me emotional that to realize that they are now happy. They're happy in their own skin, and they're easy to be with. That in the past they've been uncomfortable and awkward and not happy in social situations. But a couple of weeks ago, met up with my parents, and it was just delightful because they're happy. They're actually happy being who they are. And it just feels like a message for everybody, that if we can be happy with who we are and that we're accepted, just accepted for
Yes.
who, it's like, who is this person in front of me? I don't, and it doesn't, because somebody, I shared a photo and somebody assumed that they were a woman, and and then somebody else has said, well, how do they present? They present as male or female? And I said, they present as themselves. And it's and I and what you were saying earlier about being non-binary is a sort of negative. It's not describing what they are; it's describing what they're
What they
not.
aren't. Yeah.
And and knowing now, I've learned such a lot. Knowing that non-binary can mean, it means whatever it means to that one
Yeah. It
person.
doesn't actually
It's
tell
it
you
doesn't
anything.
doesn't
It tells you
tell
what
you
they aren't.
anything.
Right.
Yeah, and that there isn't, non-binary is not one thing. It is, it's not, it's not male, it's not female, it's something else. And yeah, but the because I felt inspired to be more of me by seeing my youngest being more of them. It's like, wow, if you can be you, then why am I not being fully me?
I'm just watching our time tick, and I'm just going to say, yes, is what I'm going to say. Allison, I'm so tickled that we got a chance to actually record one of our conversations and successfully record. So I really appreciate your taking the time out of your not busy schedule to sit down and have a chat with me. I hope you get more awesome weather and continued awesome views and scritches for the dog. Say hi to Murdoch. And I will see you when next I see you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. And it's raining now.